I'll start in on this one right here, which is yet again another one that probably some folks are familiar with, but probably not everybody. And definitely right up there with the mint family as far as an important plant family to know, because in general, these are going to tend to all be edible, and like the mint family, there's probably well over 100 different ones in this area, members of this family. So does anybody know the family offhand? Mustard family, or Brassicaceae if you're looking at your treasure hunt list. And then what about this plant in particular? So what do we have here? What's the common name we got for this? Yeah, creasy greens is like a collective common name for a lot of things, and that's kind of like a vernacular takeoff of cress, which you might be more familiar with, like watercress, and a lot of things in this family are called cresses, okay? And then anybody got something beyond that on this one particularly?
It's also known as upland cress.
Upland cress, all right, so that's one. Spring cress, that's kind of in the scientific name. So the scientific name of this is Barbarea verna. So Barbarea is the genus, Verna is the species, and verna from vernal or verano, well, from spring basically, is what we're talking here. So family traits, the petals on the flowers, once again, like the olive, are going to be in 4, which is relatively rare. In general, this is like nature's multivitamin before natural food stores existed, right? People all over the world were eating this for their iron and their calcium and their magnesium and various different vitamins. And at the same time, there is the potential for things in this family to pick up other positive ions like the calcium and magnesium and iron that would be not good for us, like heavy metals like mercury and lead and cadmium. So you're going to tend to want to harvest things in this family from as pristine an environment as possible. And they're going to tend to have these very typical tastes to them, which are largely related to sulfur compounds that are in there. So everybody kind of nibble on these. I know there's some going around, or feel free to grab some from here. And every single part is edible as well. I just want to point that out. The leaves will get a different flavor, kind of maybe not as palatable once it's going to flower and seed like we were talking about earlier, but they're certainly still going to be edible. And these flowers are totally going to be edible. We harvested a bunch of these in preparation for this workshop for something I call botanical bling, okay? With this idea that we eat with our eyes as well as with our mouth. If you can make something really pretty, then that's its own form of nourishment. So this is something that you could sprinkle onto your salads and various other things as well in that regard. And so feel free to harvest this to our heart's content in that regard.
And this is a fun one that a lot of local people know. And it's out in Barnardsville where I live. In the spring, you'll see these old guys like kind of walking the fields before they till. And I thought they were looking for arrowheads, which usually folks do after they till. But I went out one time to one of my neighbor's fields to see what these guys were doing, and they were picking creases. Oh. And so it was cool to see them all out there.
So years ago, I got taught that the lighter green one was way less bitter. Do you distinguish between two different varieties?
Huh, I'm not familiar with lighter green as a distinguishing thing. And I've always got to remind myself too, because like my bitter palate is like so skewed from the standard American diet, which spells sad for a reason, right? And that we're really kind of hooked on salt, sugar, fat is like the kind of like general basis. And those are all amazing things. But we're definitely doing them in excess, and we've really gotten away from bitters. We kind of like even frame that in our whole vocabulary around framing things around, you know, is a bitter pill to swallow, or we had to fight to the bitter end, or it was a bitter breakup, and like bitter is to be avoided basically. And this is another thing to once again invoke Frank Cook, and he was just very adamant that we've got to reclaim bitter. And at the same time, there is a devil in the details, that bitters that are in this brassica family, bitters in the aster family that we've already talked about, are these good bitters that are, and then the yellow dock from the buckwheat family. These are bitters that are helpful for detoxification. They stimulate the gallbladder, which helps us break down rich meals like we're going to have here shortly. And so these are really good bitters. And then there are bitters from like the nightshade family or the buttercup family that are saying, don't eat me, I'll kill you bitters, right? So it's not just bitters in general, but bitters by family that can help you as far as that goes.
Well,
Found is that the lighter green one, I mean, I'm in the bitter too. I love the chicory.
Yeah,
And all that.
yeah,
But the lighter green one, you get a much stronger crest taste.
yeah, yeah,
Cressy.
sure.
The darker green one, you get the crest, but you get the bitter.
Yeah, and definitely the time the way you harvest it, it's going to vary the bitter too, without a doubt.
and
Is this the dead nettle?
that is, you've got it.
And just to point out, this is the henbit, right? So we've got them both together. This is Lamium purpureum and Lamium aplexicaulis. So you can see they're kind of similar, but the henbit's more spread out, right? And the flowers of the henbit have a longer tube on them than the purple.
So can you eat this too?
They're both edible, sure. Yeah.
That's all in my bag.
Oh yeah, most people do.
So now-
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Maybe it'll die down a little bit too.
Henbit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think this would be a fun one to talk about and might be a nice one to gather a little bit of. I like it a lot. Anyone know this one? It's kind of a shape like a violet leaf, yeah.
This is one of the toughest leaf types to learn, actually, just by the leaf. But if you crush this up, it's got an aroma to it that's very distinctive.
What do you guys think about the stem? Yeah, and like Mark's saying, the probably most distinctive thing is the smell. So crush it up. Smell that?
Like thyme, maybe?
Well, you're in the
Well, it's the right family.
Yeah.
Notice the square stem,
It smells minty. Right?
Yeah.
which a lot of our garden herbs, as what's your name? I forget because I met you. Saeed. As Saeed brings up thyme, a lot of our garden culinary herbs, especially from Europe, are mints, like thyme and sage and all these things. So this is another mint. And what do y'all notice about the flavor or the smell?
It's a little furry.
It is a little furry. I still like it a lot. What? Kind of. I really enjoy it. Do you like it much?
Yeah, I'd use it more for tea and brewing than for like salads or something. But
say?
Flowers?
yeah.
It does have flowers. That's pretty
I have a
fun.
flower kind of similar to this since it's in the mint family, which we didn't mention, but the mints are going to have a little lip on the bottom and a little hood on the top.
A lip and a hood. Anyone know what this is? So it's used traditionally in brewing. It used to be used to hop beers. So there's this whole conspiracy theory that hops. What kind of effect do hops have on our bodies?
Sedative, aren't they?
Yes. And so if you wanted to control the masses,
Yeah.
what would you want to feed them? Especially in the form of alcohol, because who can resist alcohol? Beer, yes. And so hops in beer. Great way to control the masses. I don't know if I totally buy this, but it's very interesting theory. And so there's a lot of herbs that were used that had that bitter quality that were used to hop beers traditionally before hops. And so this is one of them. This is Gill Over the Ground. And I really like the flavor. Pretty awesome.
Name again? Yeah.
Gill over the ground. Or ale hoof is a way to remember that relationship to brewing. Creeping Charlie, this actually has a lot of names. I'm sure there's at least about 15, 20 common names from around here for this plant. And that's something to pay attention to, is whenever something has a ton of common names, that means a lot of people have paid attention to it and tried to kind of make it their own and given it a name.
So on runners.
Yeah, like a lot of the things from the mint family.
Ground ivy is not on.
Ground ivy is the most common name, but as I was mentioning earlier with wild onion, not calling it onion grass because it's not grass, I wouldn't call this ivy because there's English ivy, there's poison ivy, there's like all these other ivies that are in different families, so that can kind of confuse the issue. as far as the relation. Yes, definitely. And like just to follow up on this brewing idea, right? Because whether you could extend it to barbecue sauce, which it's mentioned earlier, or curries, or various other things, like grandmother to grandmother, grandfather to grandfather, valley to valley, holler to holler around here. Those recipes are going to vary depending on the family recipe and what's growing around them locally. And so brewing is a case in point where hundreds of plants historically have been used in brewing, and then they dumbed it down to just barley, hops, water, and yeast. And we are now re-expanding out, especially through the lens of brewing honey wines, meads in this area. I've taken note of over 150 different types of plants that have been used in brewing in the Asheville area, and do lots of classes around that specifically if you're interested more in bringing that into your life as well. Of course, this is Beer City, USA, and we've even got some big brewers that are using stuff beyond hops now, like New Belgium, that's coming to the area, that has this whole series called the Lips of Faith series, where they reclaim some of these ancient recipes that have an extended mix of plants in them.
That is really neat.